Welcome back. It's go time. We have two championship games to break down. One in the NFC, one in the AFC. We'll start with the game that Joe House is going to be at. It's in the city of brotherly love, and you have an Eagle team that ran all over the Rams, but was in a sticky situation in the final couple of minutes of that game, had to sweat out Matthew Stafford in the 2-minute drive, needed a big Jalen Carter sack to ultimately be the difference in the game. Eagles won by 6, ran it great, threw it terribly. Washington, on the other hand, was incredible in their game against the Detroit Lions. Jaden Daniels was incredible. The offense was efficient. They forced a gazillion Lion turnovers, and it kind of masked house the fact that Detroit, when they had the ball offensively, they were able to do whatever they wanted to do. So I'm going to start with you because you are the resident Seawords fan. Your team is playing in the NFC title game. I'll start here. Is what Washington was able to do from a blueprint standpoint against Tampa and against Aaron Glenn's Detroit defense, is that, my friend, sustainable in this matchup against Fangio's Eagles?
So it's interesting that you pose it that way because they did two very different things against those two teams, but the common thread is both Tampa and Detroit contributed to their own demise. They were accomplices in their defeat by turning the football over at exactly the worst possible times. So in terms of the Tampa situation, it really was, the fumble by Baker Mayfield at the end of that game. That was the thing that tilted it, created the opportunity for Washington. And then Detroit was a multiple of turnovers. And I just want to quickly take a shot at Ben Johnson, because let me tell you, under no uncertain circumstances, if they had given the ball to Jahmyr Gibbs 25 times in the second half, the Detroit Lions would have won that football game. There was no scenario. They could have given him bubble screens, however they want to put the ball in that man's hands. Washington had no answer whatsoever. Instead, they let Jared Goff control the football, and that was the reason that they lost the game. The handicap for this game, and let's just start with a dose of reality, okay? This is from our boy Cleve TA. Rookie quarterbacks, conference championship game, 0-5 straight up, 1-4 against the spread. With the average, against the spread margin of nearly 10 points, all 5 losses by at least 5 points. And Purdy was the last guy. We saw that poor guy get knocked out against this Eagles team. Teams like Washington that won and covered as underdogs in the first 2 rounds, 1-5 straight up, 2-4 against the spread in the conference championship. And then underdogs in divisional matchups. So Washington and Philly, if they meet in the conference championship round, 0-4 straight up, 1-3 against the spread, all 4 under their team total. So that's what you're up against. It's a sizable task. This is the 4th consecutive road game for Washington. And, they had the benefit of that beautiful track inside of Detroit, that beautiful controlled environment. The speed that Washington possesses, it's sneaky speed. They were able to leverage into that. This is going to be knockdown, drag out, NFC East football. It makes my insides, on the one hand, thrilled, but also my stomach is turning and churning. JJ, Washington, the path to win this game is very similar to the Tampa game. It needs to be limited possessions. That game had 7 for Tampa, 7 for Washington. That's the best way. And I'll set the over-under for Saquon Barkley at 199.5 yards. And if they hold him under it, now that's not the number, but it's a historically high number for the prop. But to me, if they can hold Saquon under 200, then I'm telling you there's a chance.
So, Raheem, I want to set the stage here because House hit on a lot of trends that absolutely favor the Philadelphia Eagles in this particular matchup. Then you throw in the fact that Washington's defense leaves a lot to be desired. They have not exactly wowed you in these 2 games that they've won in the postseason. However, there to me is an alarming mismatch at quarterback going into this game. And it sounds crazy because the guy who I would say I am way more concerned about has already gone to a Super Bowl. But we watched the Eagles last week against the Rams. Their passing attack was atrocious. Jalen Hurts was missing guys. His pocket presence was not what it needed to be. We're talking about a passing yard number in the hundreds, for goodness sakes. Is that the avenue, you think, for Washington doing the unthinkable here? It's the Jaden Daniels show, and it's the limitations on Jalen Hurts on full display. Is that how Washington wins this game?
It's definitely Jaden Daniels. And, the interesting thing about the Washington Commanders is that they don't punt. That's just not what they do. All four conference finals teams have a fourth down conversion rate of over 70%. The Commanders lead the NFL at 87.5% on fourth down. And you could also take that and look at the third down conversion rate. The Commanders are sixth in third down conversion rate at 45.6%. That's better than both the Bills and the Eagles, who are 7th and 10th, respectively. So when I look at this matchup, it tells me that this is very similar to what we saw with the Detroit Lions. It's going to be a high variance matchup based on who's going to be able to convert fourth downs and who's going to be able to avoid turning the ball over and generate some takeaways. And I think from what I've seen this year, I trust Jaden Daniels. I trust Jaden Daniels to be able to convert. Now, the issue with this game is the fact that House spoke about this on Monday. They lost their left guard, Sam Cozy, with the torn ACL. And the Philadelphia Eagles have a dominant pass rush, and they have the ability to wreck a game without blitzing. And Jalen Carter, you saw he made that key sack at the end of the Rams game. So that's a concern. But when I look at Jaden Daniels, I just think there's something special and something that's just truly not able to be quantified. And it's very difficult for me to just lay down a bet on the Eagles, despite everything telling me that that's what you should be doing.
So we have the rematch aspect in this particular game. Not just one rematch. They played twice. They're division rivals. How's the first time we saw this matchup? I think it's pretty obvious. Jaden Daniels was not 100% right. That was that period of time where Jaden Daniels was dealing with injuries. He was playing. He was gutting it through, but he wasn't 100% right. The second matchup was when Jalen Hurts got concussed, and it looked like Philly was going to be able to have their way with Washington. Instead, you ended up getting a classic game. It was back and forth. You had all sorts of scoring, and Daniels orchestrated a late drive after a Devontae Smith drop that ended up being the difference in the game. Normally, I feel like I look at these rematches and say, yeah, I have a real good feel for what I'm going to see on Sunday. But with Daniels not really being right in the first game, and with Hurts not playing in the second game, I don't know if you feel the same way. I have a really hard time looking at those rematches and saying there's a lot I can gain from that, Well,
and on top of that, I totally agree with your observation there. This is going to be its own unique run with its own unique characteristics, and the injuries are a big part of that. No Nakobe Dean for the Eagles. Quinion Mitchell, questionable. Sam Cosmi, definitely out. And what kind of impact and role does that play? Goddard only played in one of the two games against Washington this season. So this will have its own unique aspects. Here's what I'm waiting for, fellas. Let's get somebody to tell the truth about what the story is with Jalen Hurts' knee, because I haven't heard anybody tell the truth yet. The market believes that Jalen Hurts is 100% healthy because this number opened at 4.5 and now it's up to 6.5. So the market thinks that dude, through some combination of miracle, he's got the clear and the cream. And I'm not suggesting anything nefarious. I'm just saying he's got all the ointments and the unguents and the balms and the salves. He's applying everything he needs to apply to that knee. And he's also perhaps going to be under the influence of an entirely appropriate array of medications to make sure that he can go out there and play. But if he's immobile and he doesn't feel comfortable, in a 7-step drop back, planting and throwing, like he's not throwing the ball down the field as is. He hasn't been doing it in these playoffs. There are not big 20-yard explosive plays coming out of Jalen Hurts. That was before the man's knee bent over backwards. So that's, to me, the most crucial element of this whole assessment and the unique attributes of this game. What's going on with Jalen Hurts, JJ?
It's a fair question to have. Raheem, this line is starting to skyrocket. It's at 6.5 at FanDuel. 6.5. Was it the 5.5, 6 range? It's continued to go up. Here's my feeling on it, and I'll see if you're on the same page with this. If you like Washington in the game, I Washington wins, personally. I do not think we will live in a world that I know it's a division game, and I know these games end up being wacky between the Eagles and the Seawards historically. Like, there's a history of that. I understand that. But to me, if Philly wins the game, I think they win in margin. I do. I just think it's a lot of those rookie quarterback trends. I think it's the defense overwhelming. I think maybe it's Washington not having the same luck on fourth down. To me, Raheem, if the game is close and Jaden Daniels has a chance to go and pull it out like he has so many times throughout the course of this year, I think Washington's going to win. So to me, if you like Washington, I think you have to get involved at the very least in a sprinkle with that money line because the game's close. I think Daniels finds a way, dude. I do.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, you know, the interesting thing, if you go back to that first game, and you guys mentioned Jaden Daniels wasn't healthy, it was a 10-12 game in the fourth quarter. And the Commanders went for it on 4th and 2 at the Eagles 26 with 8 minutes to go. Daniels didn't get it. The Eagles scored a touchdown, and Daniels threw another interception, and this game finished 26-18. So I don't know if you can take anything from the margin in that game. It feels like these two teams are going to play close games, and my gut is telling me that the Commanders can win this game. And I just think Jaden Daniels is super special. The interesting thing about why this line is skyrocketing is because even though the Eagles, they closed 4.5 point favorites in their home game against the Commanders, last week against the Rams, that line closed 6.5, 7. So the market where they opened this up, 4.5, it was telling you that the Commanders are better than the Rams. And I'm not sure that that's the case. The market is saying that, though. And, interesting, House already mentioned that the Commanders are playing their 4th straight road game. So along with the actual power rating, the fact that the Commanders are playing their 4th straight road game, the Eagles are at home. That's why you're seeing this line skyrocket. But I'm not sure if I necessarily want to lay the points with the Eagles. I like you said, JJ, I think the Eagles are going to win this with margin or the Commanders are going to win this outright. But I lean towards the Commanders.
House, your confidence level was iffy in the Tampa game. I think you were starting to feel your oats a little bit in the Detroit game. Not that you thought they'd win the game, but you're like, they're going to come to play. They're going to play a close game. They covered the number. They won outright. Now that we get ready for this NFC title game, without giving out a pick, which we'll do at the end of the show, what is your confidence level that your team could do the unthinkable here, go into Philadelphia, win this game, and get to the Super Bowl?
They believe, so I believe. I mean, the Cosme injury can't be overstated. It really is important. But this team, especially on defense, with the veterans on defense, with Frankie Louvu and Bobby Wagner and Jeremy Chin, and then our brilliant rookie cornerback Mike Sanders with 2 picks against Goff last week, like that unit believes. And on the offensive side, that unit hasn't lacked for swagger all season long. And the return of Austin Eckler, again, a thing that can't be overstated in terms of how important his effectiveness is. And you saw it. In fact, I'm on Eckler props. So let's get it out of the way. Eckler, I think the number is like 23.5, 24.5. That's a bang dead over. I am on.
He loves those dump offs. It's
super effective, and that dude has some life in his legs. I mean, Eckler was super effective against Detroit. So McLaurin, I feel like he's going to get his, especially if Quinyon Mitchell's banged up at all. So they believe, so I believe. That's the answer, JJ.
Before we get to the AFC title game, House, I was watching the Hard Knocks last night, the Baltimore Ravens Hard Knocks, the AFC North one. It was really good, really entertaining. I bring this up because after rewatching that Hard Knocks sequence of the game with Buffalo and Baltimore, it made it even more apparent to me how disgusted, how sick, how just angered beyond belief I would be if I'm a Raven fan, knowing you didn't punt in the game, you dominated the second half, and yet it's Championship Sunday, and You got the baggies out, and Harbaugh's doing the end of the year presser. And listen, Lamar's amazing. He'll probably get back at some point in time. But then again, Dan Marino was saying that for a long, long period of time too, as far as, hey, I'll be back. And sooner or later, time runs out. So, man, you're a Raven fan. You got to be kicking yourself you're not playing in this game.
It's a simple formula. Stop beating yourself. Just go out there and be the team. And we talked about it amongst ourselves and our group threads and so forth, trying to look at a pathway for the Bills to win because, you know, the Ravens over the course of the season had established really dominant offensive numbers, offensive efficiencies. They look great. And we said, here's the pathway for sure. Baltimore beats itself. And Baltimore has been a team that we've seen in the regular season and in the playoffs invent new ways to lose football games. And they went out there to Buffalo. They moved the ball beautifully all day long. They just beat themselves. The drops by Andrews, the turnovers, and that's what changes the outcome of the game, and it changes the trajectory of franchises potentially. So, you know, at some point for Baltimore, would you say, oh, the ball should bounce differently for them? Like it keeps happening. They keep coming up with ways to beat themselves. I don't know what the change is. I don't know what the recipe is, but they for sure should be frustrated. They absolutely should be upset. Dream. They did it to themselves.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about a guy in Lamar Jackson who he had a monster season. You're talking about 4 interceptions all year long, and he barely fumbled the ball. He had 1 interception and a fumble, and they were fortunate because after the interception, they held the Bills to no points. But then when you have the fumble and it leads to points, it just puts you behind the 8 ball. And when they were behind the 8 ball, it felt like Lamar Jackson started to make some plays in the second half. They were running it down their throat. But then you have the 2-point conversion where it gets tipped. So now you can't tie the game. The Bills kick a field goal, and then you have the Mark Andrews fumble. So they just beat themselves. And that was a game that they absolutely should have won. And it actually showed me that this Bills defense isn't very good because when you look at all the stats, the Ravens had a 52% success rate. They had a 60% success rate on running plays. So it just felt like the Ravens really just dropped the ball just like they did last year against the Kansas City Chiefs. And unfortunately, they just cannot get right.
Now we get ready for this championship game. Buffalo and Kansas City have played a zillion times. Raheem, we know what the narrative is. Buffalo's beaten them in the regular season. In fact, Buffalo has beaten them in the regular season each of the last 3 years. Guess what? They have matched up in the postseason, and Josh Allen is 0-3 against Patrick Mahomes. Now, Buffalo, you can make the argument they got thoroughly outplayed. We all would make that argument last week against Baltimore. They also had some good luck on their side, potentially. Bass making a big field goal. Bills kickers, they never make big kicks. He made one. Getting some luck on the Andrews drop or the deflected pass on the 2-point play. I know there are folks in Western New York wanting to believe that this time, Raheem, it's going to be different. But the Chiefs, to me, went through their game against Houston, didn't play their best by any stretch of the imagination, still won comfortably, still won by margin. How is this different this time around for Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills? What's the pathway to that?
I'm actually not sure because Houston outgained the Kansas City Chiefs 336 yards to 212 yards and became the first team amongst 50 in NFL history to lose a playoff game with no turnovers and a plus 100 yardage advantage. So if the Chiefs can win under those circumstances, it's very difficult for me to bet against this Chiefs team. And look, I do have the Buffalo Bills power rated as higher than the Chiefs. But when it comes to the postseason, I think you have to bump up this Chiefs team's power rating. And you look at the Buffalo Bills, they've suffered some injuries. Teron Johnson, he has a left shoulder injury. You look at Taylor Rapp, he exited the game against the Ravens with a hip injury. You look at Christian Benford, he's in the concussion protocol. So you have much of your secondary, and I just highlighted that they weren't good defensively against the Ravens. Now you got to go and take on the God, Patrick Mahomes on the road. Last year was the golden opportunity because the Bills actually had the home game. Now you're asking this team to go into Arrowhead and win one on the road. It's very tough. And the only pathway that I can find for the Bills to win this game is for them to do what they've done all year long. And the interesting thing about this Bills team is that they have tied or won the turnover battle in all 19 games this year, breaking the record. Yeah, held by the 97 Broncos, the 2000 Ravens, and the 2013 Seattle Seahawks. All of those teams have won the Super Bowl. So if they don't get any negative regression, maybe they win this game.
Yeah, JJ, it's a tough path for Buffalo, and Dream touched on it with respect to the secondary. Listen to these numbers. I mean, since week 14, they were 29th in dropback EPA, this secondary. The Bills allowed the fourth most passing yards, the third most yards per attempt on 20-yard or more throws. Last week, we just watched it. Lamar completed 3 of 5 attempts of 20 yards or more. Both Rashad Bateman and Isaiah Likely with catches of 35 yards or more. And we have been anticipating that this Chiefs offense, with the vertical threats that have been kind of muted because of the health of the receiving core, that at some point we might see it. This might be it, because the other aspect of this Bills team, they don't get sustained pressure. Now, it will be a fascinating matchup to see if they're able to generate some pressure. If we see a throwback Von Miller game, right? And that left side of the Chiefs' offensive line still vulnerable. But the Bills have to invent ways to pressure Mahomes, because if he's able to get vertical, there's no question that the Chiefs receiving core, and some folks thought it might come against the Texans, but the Texans defense really showed us something, didn't they? It might be against this Bills defense. And then what you're really asking for, you're asking Josh Allen to have a perfect game, which he might have in him, because he's been incredible this season. He's my MVP for this year, but you need a perfect game out of Josh Allen, JJ.
Yeah, I think that's the blueprint. Raheem, you hit it, the turnover aspect. I did not know Buffalo's either tied or ahead in every single game this year, but we've seen it. They've had a lot of fortuitous turnover luck. They are going to need it in this game. I think the weakness of the Chief tackles has to be exploited. Like, if Buffalo is going to win, that to me has got to be a major talking point, a major conversation. And last but not least, Joe House, astutely, all over it. Josh Allen, fair or unfair. The narrative is you're an all-world quarterback. You're super fun to watch in the regular season. You've had great playoff success, but you can't beat number 15. Can you put on the Superman cape? And can you flip the narrative the way Peyton Manning was able to do it back in 2006 against Tom Brady? Remember, Brady owned Peyton Manning in those head-to-head matchups. They're down 21-3. I know the title game is being played on the road as opposed to being in Indy's RCA Dome, but you know what happened in that particular game? Peyton Manning had that moment which allowed him to break through. Steve Young against Aikman and the Cowboys had the moment where he was able to go and break through. Or are we looking at Dan Marino and Jim Kelly? Are we looking at Troy Aikman and Brett Favre, where it just continues to be one-sided? Championship Sunday picks. House, we'll start with your Commanders in Philadelphia. You know the line. You know the total. Take it away, sir. Best bets.
I like Washington plus the 6.5 points, and I like the under 47.5, a classic NFC East knockdown, drag them out. I think this is going to be a game with long drives on both sides of the football, and I think possession-wise, we might only get that 6 or 7 on each side. Both of those things play into an under, and they play into a game that will finish less than a touchdown. That's my play. Commies plus 6.5 and the under 47.5 on that game.
I was getting emotional making that pick, Raheem. Very emotional right there. What's your picks for the Commanders and the Eagles?
I'm going to go with Dallas Goedert over 38.5 receiving yards. This guy has 16 targets. Let me take that back. I'm going to go with Dallas Goedert over 30. I'm going to go with Dallas Goedert over 38.5 receiving yards. This guy has 16 targets the last 3 weeks. He's going over this each out of the last 3 weeks. 56 yards, 47 yards, 55 yards. He is the security blanket for Jalen Hurts. I don't think the Washington Commanders defense is going to be that focused on him, so you should be able to get some easy looks. I also want to sprinkle something on the Commanders' money line because I think Jaden Daniels is special.
Once again, I'm going to be the bad guy for Joe House. I'm taking the Philadelphia Eagles here laying the points against Washington. I know it's been a feel-good story. Just too many trends against the rookie quarterback on the road playing Championship Sunday. Don't love the matchup against Fangio's defense. I am with our guy House on the under in this game, and I'm also riding the Austin Eckler receiving prop, which you want to get. I am all over it at 24.5. He will be involved in the game in a big way. Okay, Raheem, I'm starting with Kansas City and Buffalo. I'm calling dibs on this one. I've gotten burned so many times over the years betting against Patrick Mahomes in these big games. It's time to put that to an end. I am on the Kansas City Chiefs. I am on the money line. I am playing them at -1.5. And I know it's all well and good that Western New York thinks it's their time. You're going up against the Michael Jordan of the NBA. No, the Michael Jordan of the NFL. You know what I'm saying? I'm not picking against Mahomes. I'm not picking against Reed. I'm not picking against that Spagnuolo defense. I'm all over Kansas City, Raheem. They find a way because it's what they always do. It's about time I get on board. Give me the Chiefs.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the over 47.5. My model makes this 48.5, but it's right on the number. These two teams, they tend to go over with Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes. I think they've gone over 5 out of 8 times. These teams have played 8 times in the Mahomes-Allen era. So let's go over.
Yeah, and I'm also going to join you, JJ, with Kansas City on the money line, -126 in the FanDuel Sportsbooks. Patrick Mahomes, 16-3, his whole playoff career. Come on. I have so much respect for the Bills, and I am going to express that in the form of a Josh Allen over rushing yards, over 47.5. When Josh Allen is on the road, things break down. He's gone over 67 yards in all of his road playoff games, including 2 at Arrowhead. You know Spags is going to blitz him, so he will be looking to run if those defensive backs have their back to the play. Allen did not have to run against the Ravens, but I see it coming here. His career playoff average is 52.5 rushing yards per game, over 47.5 for Josh Allen.
I'm going to double down, Joe House, with you on the Josh Allen over rushing yards. With that blitzing Steve Spagnuolo defense, and with Josh Allen knowing the magnitude of the game, this is where these quarterbacks run a lot more. I think he finds his way to that total.